Have you ever wondered how the current state of affairs between the US and the Houthis evolved? To understand the present, we must revisit the past. The tension between the US and the Houthis, a Yemeni rebel group, has escalated recently. A series of events, including the Houthis' surprising attacks on the United Arab Emirates, a country considered one of the safest in the world, has led to this. In response, the US made a hefty promise to deploy fifth-generation fighters to aid the UAE. This is just the beginning. Let's delve deeper into the timeline of events. In order to understand the gravity of the situation, we need to rewind a bit and look at the chronological series of events. Our story begins in early 2022 when the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, intercepted 3 hostile drones. The origins of these drones remained unclear, but the UAE, a member of the Saudi-led coalition, had been at war with the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen since 2015. Until this point, the UAE had largely managed to avoid such attacks, which is why this sudden strike startled many residents, considering the UAE as one of the world's safest cities. Following these drone attacks, the United States pledged to deploy fifth-generation fighters to assist the UAE against the Houthi threat. Concurrently, the UAE lobbied the US to designate the Houthis as a foreign terror organization. This was a significant move, marking the beginning of a more active stance against the Houthi rebels. Fast forward to January 2024 in Iraq, where US personnel were suddenly under fire. Iranian-backed militias launched a barrage of ballistic missiles and rockets at the Al-Assad airbase. Although most of the missiles were intercepted, some hit their mark, causing damage and injury. This attack was seen as a significant escalation, marking the largest in a series of incidents targeting US forces in Iraq and Syria. This attack also marked a shift in the conflict, as it involved more powerful ballistic missiles and was perceived as an act of solidarity with Palestinians amid the Israel-Hamas conflict. Iran's backing of the Houthis extended to their targeting of commercial shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. In response to this escalation, the United States conducted retaliatory strikes against Houthi missiles. This move came after tensions had already been rising due to a U.S. military drone strike in Baghdad on January 4th. With 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq and 900 in Syria as part of the mission to counter the Islamic State, the stakes were high. These events set the stage for the self-defense strike by the U.S. forces. Now that we have the background, let's discuss the self-defense strike in detail. The strike in question was a calculated response by the U.S. forces against the Houthis. This came as a result of a series of escalating events, with the Houthis being accused of presenting an imminent threat in the Red Sea. The U.S. forces are no strangers to such situations, and they've been trained to respond decisively when faced with such threats. The reasons cited by the U.S. for the strike were crystal clear. The Houthis, backed by Iran, were believed to be targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. This was not only a direct threat to international commerce and freedom of navigation, but also a potential trigger for a much larger conflict in the region. The U.S. forces, therefore, were left with no choice but to launch a self-defense strike. This was not merely an act of aggression, but rather a necessary measure to protect their interests and maintain peace and stability in the region. They had a responsibility to safeguard the lives and livelihoods of those who depend on the safe passage of commercial shipping in these waters. Moreover, the U.S. forces were also mindful of the wider implications of their actions. They understood that their response would send a strong message to the Houthis and their Iranian backers. It was a clear signal that acts of aggression would not be tolerated and would be met with firm and decisive action. The strike, therefore, was not just about neutralizing an imminent threat. It was also about setting a precedent and maintaining a balance of power in the region. It was about showing the world that the U.S. forces were ready and willing to take necessary action when the stakes were high. The U.S.'s self-defense strike has indeed changed the dynamics in the region. What have we learned from all this? It's clear that tensions between the U.S. and the Houthi rebels, backed by Iran, are escalating. This escalation has been marked by a series of events, including the Houthis targeting the United Arab Emirates, an ally of the U.S., and the launching of ballistic missiles at a U.S. military base in Iraq by Iran-backed militias. In response to these threats, the U.S. has launched a self-defense strike against the Houthis. This action was not taken lightly, but was deemed necessary due to the imminent threat presented by the group in the Red Sea, a critical trade route. The U.S. has also pledged to deploy fifth-generation fighters to assist allies in the region and continues to conduct retaliatory strikes against Houthi missiles. This situation's implications are vast, affecting not only the U.S. and its allies, but also global trade and security. The tensions between Iran-backed militias and the U.S. in Iraq and Syria are part of a larger, more complex conflict which includes the mission to counter the Islamic State. As we can see, the situation between the U.S. and the Houthis is a complex and evolving issue. It's essential to stay informed and understand the context behind these events.